Hello, and welcome to Working Historians, a podcast series where we discuss what historians do with their lives. I am Rob Denning, Associate Dean for Liberal Arts for Southern New Hampshire University's online history programs. Today, Jimmy Fennessy and I are catching up with our old pal Bob Irvine, who appeared in our second episode way back in the mists of 2017. Bob teaches graduate history courses at Southern New Hampshire University and is a consultant for Parc Resources in Eastern Oregon. Today we're going to discuss some of the consulting projects that Bob has been involved in over the past 4 years. So, Bob, what have you been up to?
Well, the last 4 years, a lot of continuing to do consulting work, mostly with tribes, still with some nonprofits and local governments, and in a lot of ways sort of chasing the federal trends in a lot of ways. Every 4 years lately, there's been a change in presidential administrations, and so there's a change in focus and emphasis in the funding streams. Never more so than right now, to be honest. We're just swamped, and a lot of infrastructure money is coming out. Probably the most infrastructure money we've seen since 2009, and all of that Recovery Act money. So we're really hopping right now, and right now it's mostly social service. But like I say, I'm getting ready for infrastructure, and it's an interesting world because along with infrastructure, but also green infrastructure, energy efficiency is also right at the forefront. I'm working on a really cool project in Port Orford that is focusing on the live seafood market, which is something I haven't ever dealt with before, but it's pretty neat. And then also just the recovery from COVID. That's a huge issue. And whereas in a lot of times I have made the case for different clients that their location is particularly hard hit or is particularly prone to poverty or unemployment. Now every tribal client sort of has the same issue, and so does every rural client. So I'm a little bit of a sea change there, but lots of opportunities.
Is there kind of a sense among the the Indian community about because it's the Biden nominated the first Native American to the cabinet. It was the Minister of the Interior, I believe. Or not minister, Secretary of the Interior. We don't do ministers here. Secretary of the Interior. And so you mentioned there's kind of a sea change happening in federal funding and all of that. And so do you see all of that kind of coming out of just because of the results of the election last year? Or is there kind of a longer trends at play?
That's a really good question. And I'm dying to get back out on the road and meet with clients and a lot of friends too that I've made over the years. It's just not the same, and people are not nearly as forthcoming over Zoom, which is the format the platform we've been using a lot, especially with social service clients, because it's I spent more time learning about HIPAA in the last year than I probably have in the previous 20. I don't have the sense that I'm like getting the full story, but every time an administration changes, there's especially when it goes Republican to Democrat, Democrat to Republican, there's a pretty substantial change. But this time there was I don't know, I almost felt like the floodgates were opened up. You usually expect change, but things got bottled up, and then all of a sudden, plus you have the COVID, plus the focus on recovery and getting things moving. So there is kind of a flood, but we've also seen deadlines get pushed back. What are called NOFAs, Notice of Funding Availabilities, get announced and then pulled back in as the agencies are trying to figure out, hey, we've got more money than we thought we would. How are we going to distribute it in an equitable way that we can defend to Congress later?
So, Bob, we were talking a little bit earlier about, where you were right before COVID hit. Are you able to talk a little bit about some of the specific work that you're doing? Because I'd love to hear about that.
Oh, yeah. It's like I said, there's sort of a season, grant seasons, and they move. But right now I'm working on a lot of domestic violence projects for tribes, which is not very, it's hard. it's hard reading the statistics. It's hard reading the stories and and learning what I need to in order to make the case is it's difficult. It makes me grateful that those are not personal experiences of mine. So right now I'm working on a lot of domestic violence projects, but generally speaking, a lot of the tribal projects very much are focused on moving tribes towards financial independence, sustainability, and here locally where I live in northeastern Oregon, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation are the largest private employer in the county. And it's a county of 70, 80,000 total people. So the tribes are becoming an increasingly important economic engine, and figuring out how to maximize that leverage, but also to diversify, so that when something like COVID happens, they're not completely wiped out. Is the new challenge that I'm seeing from some of my clients, and it's sort of the lesson that some are taking away. A lot of great emergency preparedness planning, folks who are ready, but I don't think for this scale of an impact. So that's been at the forefront of a lot of what we were doing right before COVID hit. One of the things we were working on a lot was energy independence, the development of microgrids, so that the notion is you're going to produce power and you're going to consume it without necessarily being connected to the larger grid, or selling that power back, because increasingly, at least in some places, power companies are not interested in getting power back from their consumers. So hopefully that'll come back around, because I think it's a pretty exciting field, and it fits perfectly with the tribes and their push for sovereignty. That makes a lot of sense to me.
So that's the connection back to green and sustainable energy that you were talking about earlier, and this new infrastructure, the infrastructure bill that the Biden administration is trying to push through, that contains a lot of renewable energy funding.
Yeah, exactly. And how that plays out. I mean, in some places in rural Oregon, anyway, there's sort of reaction to the sprouting up of windmills and what that means for aesthetics and wildlife. But I see that as it's almost an irresistible tide in some respects, and it's certainly things that rural communities in particular are interested in, and also the future of hydropower. That's sort of something that I'm really interested in. As a historian, I focused on the development of water law and the control of water in the West for my dissertation. And of course, hydropower was at the forefront of that. And now we're seeing dams get taken out. We're sort of starting to really assess the damage to things like salmon runs. That's a cool project I'm working on for a tribe I don't know if I can name, but it's here in the Pacific Northwest that's working on restoring salmon runs. And part of that is linked to the dam, either dam removal or building hatcheries, which is pretty cool. My daughter actually did an internship for the local tribe and their lamprey project and in their fisheries lab. So that's also very much on my mind. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I'm really interested to see what happens with all of the Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation dams, and what we do, because that power is pretty important, but the salmon runs are also important. So that's sort of something I have no idea how it's going to play out, but I've got my eye on it.
That's really cool. I think we've talked before about how my dissertation was on environmental policymaking in California, and part of it was the building of dams or not building dams. And it's always interesting to think about the changing ways that we generate energy. And so, in the past, there was a huge emphasis on hydroelectric because that seemed to be kind of the clean energy of its day, because, theoretically, you're not spewing stuff into the atmosphere and it's just all, the water is flowing that way anyway, so we might as well harness the water. But there are some pretty dramatic effects on, the ecosystems and the various wildlife that live in the area. And so it'll be interesting to see how that stuff bounces back. and then see how things transition to the new forms of energy, like windmills. I'm not a huge subscriber to the theory that windmills kill a huge amount of birds. So I don't think we're going to see kind of the same comparable effect on wildlife that we would see with hydroelectric and all of that. But it will be interesting to see how the environment changes with these with these new forms of energy extraction that we're going to be pursuing over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Well, we did an entire episode where we discussed the research on the Teton Dam disaster, didn't we?
Oh yeah.
Lorianne Deaver.
Oh, I'm gonna have to find that, because that story is fascinating to me. I don't know if that's sort of a rubbernecking impulse on my part, but that really is the end of the Pick-Sloan plan and the great dam building era in the West. What a really interesting chapter. What a marginal dam site too.
Yeah. So yeah, she was talking about the collapse of the Teton Dam in '76, and that really was, like you said, Bob. That really was one of the last kind of gasps of the big dam building era. One of the other steps, I think, in that was, getting back to me again, because it's all about me and my dissertation. There was the canceling of the Round Valley Dos Rios Dam in California in 68, 69, which was canceled because of the effects that it would have on the natural landscape and the Native Americans that lived there. So yeah, it's all connected.
That's cool. I'd forgotten about that cancellation. It wasn't nearly as dramatic as the dam failing there. And flooding was at Rexburg where all of the water inundated the town.
I think so. That sounds right. I don't remember. I'm not as well versed on the Teton collapse as I am on. Well, I'm actually not that well informed on much of anything, but
everything I know about it, I learned in our podcast. So there you go.
I know it's up north of the Fort Hall Reservation, the Shoshone-Bannock tribe. So I worked out there, and I always meant to get up to that site, and I just never have managed. But it was always on one of those things. If we had a few extra hours, I was going to go up there.
It would be interesting to go up there and just see what remains of the wreckage up there.
I think the only massive dam project I've ever seen. I mean, we obviously had smaller dams in the area where I grew up, but it was the Hoover Dam. It was on my drive across country moving back to California in 2015. Nope, 2017. That was my first time ever seeing that dam, and it was just amazing. I got out of the car and ran across it as Aaron drove across slowly.
Yeah. Did you go down inside of it?
No, we had all of our stuff because we were moving, so we didn't want to leave the car packed to the gills with every single thing that we owned. So it's on the list to go back to and actually get to explore it next time.
Yeah, it's pretty cool down there.
Yeah, you absolutely have to. I took my kids on the tour, and I took, they were young. I think my youngest was probably 4 or 5 years old, and he spent the whole rest of the trip telling his mom what a damn cool tour he went on.
As a kid, any chance to swear, even if it's not swearing.
Thanks, Dad.
Best damn tour ever, he said.
That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, the talk of dams and flooding of valleys and environmental change always reminds me of the final scene in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Well, I'm going to have to look up that episode because that sounds interesting.
It's on the it's in the feed. You go to workinghistorians.com. Everything's there.
Okay. Awesome.
Way to really push our website.
Yeah, I'm plugging it.
Yeah, come on, take the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey Bob, I know you're a guest and we could give you the link, but why don't you just go to our website, www.workinghistorians.com.
Mm-hmm. It's the greatest website you'll ever visit, I promise you.
It actually is really great.
So I think one thing that I meant to ask you in the original interview, Bob, but I don't think I actually got to it, or we got distracted or something. But I was curious, how did you get into the consulting game in the first place?
It's kind of like, it seemed like a good idea at the time. That's kind of my line for a lot of things. I had the opportunity. I I really came out of my dissertation looking for a job, but my wife was ahead of me. She got a PhD first and got a job first, and moved first. So I was doing sabbatical replacement stuff, and I'd written grants to support my dissertation, and I had an opportunity to write a couple grants for a nonprofit, and they paid me a few shekels, and then I had the opportunity to join a consulting firm, and the salesperson liked to have somebody on board with a PhD, could wave it around, and in sales stuff, and I just sort of fell into it, and I love the teaching. I really like the teaching. This is such a wonderful opportunity to use that background, but also gives me a reason to read and keep researching, and also to connect the research that I do. I wish I had more time to write things that weren't grants, but I'm working on that. But it really was it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, it seems to have worked out for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I'm very lucky, and I love working where I do, and one of these days I'll grow up and get a career.
Don't rush it.
No, I'm not going to rush it. No.
Are you still with the same firm you were with before?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
We're still banging away at it, and it's I find it very rewarding. I like the projects that we do, and I like being able to walk away from things that I think make a difference in the world, whether it's a health facility or a domestic violence shelter, or a new tribal enterprise that puts people to work and brings some activity to a rural community. That's, for me, that feels like a win, and that's plenty good.
I was going to say, you're taking that historical training, the ability to research, the ability to synthesize narratives out of experience and find relevant information and impactful information, and actually use it to have that real world impact, where you're not only impacting policy, but you're interacting with real people and changing lives.
I love the way you said that. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back and cut and paste that out. But yeah, I think a background in history is nothing but helpful. And I have lots of friends that I went to school with who don't work in history, don't teach history, but that background of critical thinking, being able to analyze something, be able to draw conclusions and defend analysis seems pretty relevant in a whole lot of endeavors and fields.
Yeah, I would say so. And
that's what you're supposed to say.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, you're saying it in a room full of trained historians, so you're probably not going to get much of an argument.
All right, I'll be the contrarian. I don't think source analysis is really all that important.
Yeah. Disclaimer: it is.
Yeah. You might have a future too.
Yeah, I think to be the contrarian, though, puts me on the wrong side of everything that I believe in. So I forget that.
Dang it.
Yeah, if we ever work out a regular thing where we've got like the shticks for everybody, I don't want to be the contrarian. Never mind.
Okay, we won't force you to be the contrarian.
Yeah, right. You know what we don't need any more of? History training.
You know what profession should go away? Historian.
Yeah, you know what we should revoke funding for? Yeah, you know it.
Liberal arts.
Of course, the supposition there is that there's funding in the first place.
Yeah.
Touche.
Yeah.
Trying to use some reverse psychology.
Just cutting a little too close here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think, I think that kind of covers what we were intending to do here. But it's really cool talking to you, Bob. We may be calling you back just randomly, just for the hell of it, going forward.
Oh yeah, sure. This has been fun. I'll come armed with a better drink too. Give you guys a heads up.
Yeah. You'll have to send us your shopping list ahead of time so that we can all be in the same position.
No, this is fun. Thanks for the invite. I've enjoyed myself, and I get to talk about myself. Who doesn't like that?
Well, right. I mean, that's one thing historians do is we just like to talk.
Yeah, and argue.
Yeah.
So really, if you need a contrarian, I'm willing to do that. Just
All right, we'll figure something out.
You'll be the random guest every now and then, Bob the contrarian.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Things are getting a little bit too chummy on this podcast, so we're going to call Bob back in for today.
That would be hilarious.
Bob, bring us back to Earth.
I see a sidelight for me. That sounds great.
Yeah, this is your alternate career where you make no money at all. And thank you all for joining us today. This episode appears on the Working Historians podcast feed, and you can subscribe to that feed on any podcast app, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Lyceum, Podbean, or whatever else you prefer. That way you won't miss any episodes, and you'll continue to hear all the other cool stuff that historians do with their lives. If you have any questions or comments for this or any of our other podcasts, send us a message to workinghistorians@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Working Historians and on Twitter at Work Historians. For Bob Irvine and Jimmy Fennessy, I'm Rob Denning. Take care of yourselves and each other.